All right, we are back and we'll begin with managing growth and public school facilities. Ms. Kendall?
Okay, welcome back, everyone. One person who I forgot to mention who is also joining us today from DPZ, he is available virtually, that's Chad Edmondson, so we may need to call on him if there are some specific transportation-related Apfo questions. All right, so let's just jump ahead to slide 3, because I know we all want to get through this presentation and start having our conversations. So I do want to point out that HOCO by Design, this is the first general plan in Howard County's history of general plans to include a chapter devoted to schools, which is also very unique in Maryland. So this slide here provides an overview of the topics that are covered in the public school facilities chapter. The chapter begins with an overview of how Howard County Public School System, the Office of School Planning, provides an overview of how they do their planning for school facilities. It takes a look at current and future enrollment trends, also discusses what are the fiscal and land use considerations that are associated with planning for school facilities. And finally, there is a section that then discusses the importance of our continued coordination and collaboration between the county and HCPSS to accommodate future school needs. Next slide. So this chapter does kick off with a brief summary of what we heard during the engagement process about schools. A lot of that was focused on need for additional school capacity, but also recognizing that there could be existing school capacity as a whole when you look at the system as a whole. Next slide. Also, as you may recall, as a part of the HOCO by Design planning process, we formed 3 different strategic advisory groups. Specifically, their responsibility was to delve into key opportunities and challenges that were recognized as a part of Howard County's future land use. And of course, one of the strategic advisory groups was focused on schools. And the members of our strategic advisory group represented a multidisciplinary group of experts. They acted as advisors to our project team, and our members had a lot of local expertise. Specifically, our school strategic advisory group, which I believe Mr. Lubley and Mr. Rogers, who are here today, they were members of that group as well. So the strategic advisory group focused on roles and responsibilities of county government, the HCPSS, and the Board of Education relative to school planning. They focused a lot of their discussion also on processes and procedures around school site identification, facilities design, and funding models. So many of the recommendations that came out of the strategic advisory group have been incorporated into HOCO by Design. I do just want to point out that as many of the decisions concerning school capacity, utilization, class size, attendance areas, new school construction, and facilities maintenance and design, they are under the purview of HCPSS and the Board of Education. So many of our recommendations in the plan do focus on efforts that the county, HCPSS, and the Board of Education can collaboratively implement, or many are just recommendations for HCPSS to consider in the future, especially as it pertains to their long-range capital planning. So many of the strategic advisory group findings, they have been incorporated into the recommendations. So I'm going to breeze past the next 2 slides and go jump to slide 8 so we can really just start to get into the content of the chapter. So our first topic that's covered in this chapter focuses on, provides an overview about HCPSS planning and discusses our future and current enrollment trends. Next slide. So every year, the Office of School Planning prepares and presents a feasibility study. It includes a comprehensive review of school boundary options, student enrollment projection over the next 10 years, and capital improvement strategies. The feasibility study also includes capacity utilization calculations, which are the basis for the following year's Apfo, Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, school capacity chart. The feasibility study also helps inform HCPSS's capital budget for the following fiscal year. Next slide. The chapter talks about what how school capacity utilization is measured, which is measured by weighing student population against a specific school's available space. Generally, the goal for school capacity is to maintain utilization rates between 90 and 100%. And as of February 2023, all high schools were projected to be under 110% through 2030, with most at or below 100%. Capacity has and is projected to increase, as we know, as a result of this last budget session, which the administration fully funded the Board of Education capital request for the second year in a row. That resulted in the Oakland Mills Schools renovation, adding capacity, also Dunlogan Middle School renovation, adding capacity. My understanding that those additions will become replacement schools. So there's going to be significant opportunities for capacity there, in addition to Guilford Park High School expected to open this fall with more than 1,600 seats. Next slide. So in terms of future trends related to enrollment, we are seeing that since 2016, the birth rate in Howard County has been decreasing. It's decreased by 11%. So we are expecting that to have an impact on school enrollment projections. Next slide. Of course, birth rates, they're not the only factor that the school uses for their enrollment projections. They also look at what they call cohort survival, first-time sales of newly constructed homes, resales of existing homes, apartment turnover, and out-of-district enrollment at regional programs. Next slide. So while the Office of School Planning uses a lot of their own data to estimate enrollment projection, DPZ does provide new housing projections to HCPSS. That's used for both their near-term and their long-term projections. So this includes a pipeline of recently approved plans, so that helps them estimate what the near-term housing growth will be. And then we also provide what future development could be based on zoning potential. So that's the long-term potential that can help inform the long-range capital planning. And as you can see on the charts to the right, when you take a look at turnover, apartment turnover compared to resales of existing homes compared to new construction, you can see that turnover and resales generate many more students than new construction. Next slide. Another future trend to keep in mind as a part of this general plan is recognizing that we are proposing a shift to smaller housing types. HOCO by Design, as we've been discussing, emphasizes growth in our future mixed-use activity centers, which are expected to have smaller housing types, which are also expected to generate fewer students. So take, for example, downtown Columbia, if we want to use that as an example. They have had nearly 1,200 housing units at this point, mostly studio and one-bedrooms, and they've only generated about 41 students. This general plan also focuses on how can we promote and encourage more diverse housing types, such as missing-middle housing and accessory dwelling units. Again, smaller housing types expected to generate fewer students. Next slide. So within this particular section of the chapter, there are a couple of policies and actions for consideration for the county and the school system. One is the county and HCPSS and the private sector should collaboratively identify school sites that meet the needs of the student population and anticipate those future growth patterns. And one recommendation specifically to do so related to that policy is to examine alternatives to Apfo waiting periods, where a development proposal may be able to move forward through voluntary mitigation payments. So that was a recommendation that was discussed with our strategic advisory group. There's also a recommendation that HOCO by Design and HCPSS long-range master plan be coordinated so that school capacity projects are planned in activity centers. So we are trying to make specific recommendations for how we can coordinate both our planning for future growth and development, our land use planning with our school planning. Next slide, fiscal considerations. So now specifically this section where we talk about fiscal considerations, this dives into how we can leverage and expand our support of capital needs for the public school system. So new schools, additions, and renovations are funded largely by general obligation bonds and the school surcharge on new homes, new construction. While general obligation bonds do fund the majority, in FY23 it was about $43 million. The school surcharge is estimated to generate approximately $30 million annually through 2040. The county also receives state funds for new school construction. Additionally, we have a transfer tax that also helps cover school land acquisition and construction costs, and that's about $2.5 million a year. As we identified in the fiscal analysis, which I know Mr. Brownell mentioned, new growth and its associated fiscal benefits, especially those that come from the transfer tax and the school surcharge, will be available to support the capital funding needed to meet future enrollment demands. So some of the specific guidance or policies that are in this section that relates to fiscal considerations is one, the county and the HCPSS should partner to leverage additional public and private resources to meet school needs. This was also based on a strategic advisory group recommendation. So they recognize that additional fiscal resources are important, that fiscal resources that are immediately available are important, since state and local capital funding mechanisms can be rigid with long planning horizons. Another action is to explore or examine private-public partnerships models as a means to address near-term school facility needs. Also, another action is to evaluate establishing a trust fund or a partnership with a philanthropic organization to support school site acquisition. So this could help HCPSS purchase and hold property or land until schools can be built. All right. In addition to fiscal considerations, there are various land use considerations that are important when planning for schools. So this chapter talks about how there are school design standards and minimum size requirements that limit the types of schools that can be considered for school use. So the School Strategic Advisory Group suggested that we explore alternative designs and the potential reuse of commercial real estate to meet some of these needs, these land use needs. Since land availability is limited, also a strategic advisory group finding, something we all know, future schools may need to look different than existing schools. So alternatives could include things like taller buildings, shared athletic facilities, co-locating schools with other public amenities. I also do want to note, just remind everyone, our consultant Matt Noonkester is with us today. So if you do have any questions about alternative school designs that he may have seen in other communities, he's here to answer some of those questions. All right. Great. The Strategic Advisory Group also found that the land reservation process and the subdivision regulations could be improved to better align with our development patterns, HCPSS planning timelines, and the development review process. HCPS also pointed out during the Strategic Advisory Group that there have been challenges with regulations that limit the developable footprint for facilities. And then the section also recognizes that there could be opportunities to integrate educational facilities into our mixed-use activity centers, especially associated with the redevelopment of Gateway. So there are several policies and actions within land use considerations that first talk about that the county and the HCPSS should collaborate on future school siting and develop tools for alternatives, such as consider adaptive reuse of commercial space, integrating pre-K into government or commercial centers, examine models for alternative school designs, and explore opportunities to co-locate school facilities with other amenities. And as I mentioned earlier, we're also seeking opportunities to integrate educational facilities into our activity centers, as that is where we have been, where HOCO by Design proposes that we concentrate the most amount of growth. So there are specific actions in the plan that call to ensure that the future development of Gateway include a thorough evaluation of school capacity and that school facilities are provided in Gateway redevelopment as needed. And another action that says the ensure the development of basically all other activity centers includes a review of school capacity needs and opportunities to address those needs within activity centers. And then also within this particular section, continuing with these land use considerations, there's specific guidance that we should revise those zoning and subdivision regulations to provide more flexibility for school development. Some ways that this could be accomplished would be through administrative approval of zoning variances, or we could also evaluate the land reservation process to determine the appropriate changes that need to be made so we could increase the use of that process. All right. The last section in the public school facilities chapter focuses on what we call accommodating future school needs. So this is really bringing together various factors that includes land use planning, Apfo, school construction and funding that help accommodate future needs. So, Kate, let's just jump to slide 28, where we can get into some of these policies and actions. So the key recommendation here calls for a more proactive approach to property identification, evaluation, and acquisition. We have further recommendations that suggest that we update policies and regulations to better align school planning needs to our changing demographics, market conditions, and land use patterns. A lot of this will be covered when we get into the next section, managing growth. There's also a recommendation that says that we could, or the school could consider a right of first refusal strategy to purchase properties in priority geographies. Also recommendations to research models to acquire and amass parcels into larger sites, or use real estate industry data to monitor acquisition opportunities, and purchase properties with leaseback options to hold for future school use. All right. So that was a quick overview of the public school facilities chapter, and now I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Bella, our Deputy Director, to give you an overview of the Managing Growth chapter.